Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to High Volume Video. I'm Keith, and today I kind of just want to talk about a bunch of movies that I've been watching over the last week or two. During the month of July, I was mostly focusing on Criterion stuff, mostly just because the sale was going on at Barnes & Noble, and I was just in the mood to watch a lot of Criterion stuff. So I was doing a series called Criterion Chronicles where I talked about 3 or 4 movies that I'd watched over the last week or so. And in this new series, I kind of just want to do a similar thing, but with no limitations, just any label, could be studio stuff, could be streaming stuff, could be Arrow, Kino, A24, anything really. So yeah, this is kind of just going to be a new series where I just talk about the movies that I've watched recently. So let's get into it. Alright, the first movie I want to talk about is Friendship. This is the new Tim Robinson, Paul Rudd, Kate Mara comedy from A24. It's directed by Andrew DeYoung, who, according to IMDb, has a ton of TV directing credits, but as far as I could tell, this was his first feature-length film he's directed. When the marketing came out for this movie, I felt like maybe Paul Rudd and Tim Robinson were an odd mix, but after watching the movie, I think they have great chemistry, and I definitely think it would be awesome if they did some more comedies like this. Tim Robinson definitely has a really unique style of comedy. If you've seen The Detroiters and I Think You Should Leave, I think those shows are on Netflix. It's very weird, awkward, cringe-worthy comedy. I think it's kind of similar to Dwight Schrute's character or Michael Scott's character in The Office. It's just very awkward, and this movie takes it to an uncomfortable level. I do think it's super funny, but I do think there are moments in this where it gets to the uncomfortable level of awkwardness and cringeworthiness. My wife even said while we were watching it, she's like, I feel bad for this guy, and I was feeling the same way for sure. Basically, Paul Rudd's character Austin moves in down the street from Craig, who's played by Tim Robinson. The mailman messes up and delivers a package to Craig's house, so he takes it down to Austin's, and they have kind of a fun little neighbor bro interaction. They end up hanging out a couple times, and the whole time Craig seems a little off, but I think he definitely has good intentions. He's not a bad guy, he's just super, super awkward and lonely. But things definitely take a turn for the worse when Austin decides to introduce Craig to some of his other friends who he definitely knows quite a bit better than he knows Craig. Craig just does some super, super weird stuff, and it makes all of Austin's friends uncomfortable, makes Austin uncomfortable, so he kind of decides to end this friendship early. I don't want to spoil any more of it because this is a pretty new movie still, but that's kind of the basic setup. It gets really weird from here. A lot of really goofy, awkward, cringeworthy stuff happens. Like I said, I did think this movie was really funny, but I will say I probably don't think this kind of comedy is for everyone. But if you like The Detroiters and I Think You Should Leave and just Tim Robinson's brand of super cringy, awkward comedy, I think you might like this one. Kate Mara also is in this, and she plays Craig's wife. I thought she did a pretty good job. Her character is kind of hard to get a read on it sometimes. She seems like she cares about Craig, but then some stuff happens where I think maybe she doesn't. Their relationship is weird, and it's played for laughs, but it is, like I said, the whole rest of the movie, it's very funny, but it's also kind of uncomfortable. And yeah, it's just nice to kind of see comedies back in the zeitgeist. We have Naked Gun. I saw that in the theater and thought it was all right, and Happy Gilmore 2 was talked about quite a bit for it had a little bit of a sizzle run there. But yeah, I definitely don't think that comedies are back to where they were in the mid-2000s yet, but it is nice to see studios taking a chance on comedies again. Alright, so next I just want to talk about James Gunn's new Superman movie real quick. I know it's been in theaters for a little while, so most people have already had a chance to see this, but my wife and I actually went to see it the same day that we watched Friendship, so it was a fun little double feature actually. But this one stars David Corenswet, who's kind of a newcomer. I haven't seen anything that he was in. previously, and then also Rachel Brosnahan, I think is how you pronounce her name. She plays Lois Lane, and then Nicholas Hoult plays Lex Luthor. I think they all did a pretty good job. And then there's also like a really fun cast of side characters that I don't want to spoil because I didn't actually know, even though the movie had been out for a while since before I got the chance to go see it. I actually didn't know about some of these other fun side characters. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I was pretty surprised actually with how much I liked it. A couple really cool things that I liked about it, that I was somewhat surprised by, I guess. So first being, it's not an origin story. I don't know why I thought that it was going to be an origin story, but it's not, and I was pleasantly surprised by that fact. Superman is like an established hero in this world. I think it's been like 3 years or something. There's a monologue at the beginning where it gives you a bunch of information about stuff that's happened in the past. I really enjoyed the fun, lighthearted tone the movie has. I think it's pretty similar to other James Gunn superhero stuff that he's done, like Guardians of the Galaxy. I think he's really good at making comic book movies that feel like comic book movies, and they're fun and they have heart. And the stories are pretty good. I think he's really good at writing these comic book character stories. You can definitely tell that James Gunn grew up reading comic books, I would say. I think one of the really big challenges anybody who makes a Superman movie faces is making him seem like he's not just all powerful. And I think they do a really good job, or James Gunn did a really good job with this. I know I'm not the only one who has that issue with the Superman character in general, but I feel like they came up with a pretty fun, unique way to make it seem like Superman isn't just this godlike character where he can't be beaten and he doesn't have any weaknesses. I think it's probably pretty predictable what is going to be used to weaken Superman, but I'm not going to spoil it here. The movie's still in theaters, so I'm sure there's people who have not had a chance to see it yet, so I'm not going to totally spoil it. But I thought the way that they came up with to make it feel like there's actually some stakes here were good. I think they did a good job with that. One of the things that I think makes Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies so great is all the stuff they do with Peter Parker and making Peter Parker's side of the movie almost more interesting and more important to the story overall. And I think James Gunn did a good job of making Clark Kent and Lois Lane just interesting characters outside of Superman. And one of my favorite things about the movie was Krypto the dog. I think the way that they implemented him and actually made him like almost like a central character in the movie was awesome. It's super playful. All the jokes around Krypto were super fun, and it made me miss my dog. So when I got home, I ran up to my dog Ellie and gave her a big hug, and yeah, Krypto was amazing in this movie. So yeah, Superman was a surprisingly fun movie for me. I'm really not the biggest Superman guy, but I definitely think this was a really fun James Gunn style superhero movie. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I would say it's worth checking out. Alright, next I did watch a couple TerrorVision titles. Recently I joined the TerrorVision video club. My buddy Robbie, Miles of Horror, kind of talked me into joining a couple months ago. It's where I got this t-shirt. And in the first package they sent me this shirt and then also the Shoestring Slashers box set, which I talked a little bit about in the last episode of Return to Videotech. These are just really cool, super low budget slashers. One that I really liked was Beware. I don't think you can buy these individually, but yeah, I thought these movies were all right, and Beware felt like a love letter to slashers. Just super duper low budget, but really fun and funny. Yeah, so if you're into super low budget stuff, maybe keep an eye out for Shoestring Slashers. I'm not sure if this one's sold out on their website yet or not, but anyways, I watched those a while ago, so I didn't want to spend too much time on them. But I did this week watch Revenge of the Radioactive Reporter, which was sitting on my shelf for a while. I missed out on this. This came out before I joined the video club, but I ended up picking this up on eBay, and it's kind of just been sitting on my shelf for a while. But I got a new box or a new shipment in from the subscription service, so before I dug too deep into those movies, I kind of wanted to go back and watch this one. And so yeah, this one was just pretty fun. People on Letterboxd were saying it's kind of like if Troma did Darkman, and I agree with that description. I think that's a pretty good way to describe this movie. I don't think it's quite as fun as most of the Troma movies I've seen, but it definitely has a similar vibe to The Toxic Avenger and a similar sense of humor. The bad guys in this are these like corporate assholes, and there's some really funny stuff that happens with them. They're just like really stereotypical corporate evil businessmen. And yeah, some of the stuff they do with those guys is just pretty funny. There's some cool practical effects in this. The main dude here, as you can see on the cover, he gets all melty and goopy and gross, and a lot of that stuff is pretty cool looking. I didn't love this movie, but I definitely thought it was pretty entertaining and pretty funny. I wouldn't put it on the same level as the Troma stuff, like I said, but I had a good time with this. If you're into the really, really goofy, over-the-top, gory, horror-esque, kind of just like... It's more horror comedy, I would say. But if you're into that kind of really ridiculous stuff, I would definitely say you should check this one out, Revenge of the Radioactive Reporter. Okay, and then I did actually get the chance to watch one of the new movies that TerraVision sent in my subscription box, and that was Devil's Sword. This is from 1984. It's a cult fantasy martial arts film, and it's definitely the first Indonesian film that I've ever seen. So the story is super silly. The main antagonist is Banyu Jaga. He's working for a horny, evil crocodile queen who abducts men to be her sex slaves. And their protagonist is an old acquaintance of Banyu Jaga named Mandela. Honestly, the plot is not all that important for a movie like this. If you're watching this movie, it's most likely just going to be for the goofy, over-the-top action. There's beheadings and severed limbs, and just it's got some really, really fun, goofy fantasy vibes. The bad guy, Banyu Jaga, he floats around on this a couple times. He floats around on a floating rock. It's pretty ridiculous. During a lot of the martial arts fights, people are flying around on wires, and there's just like a lot of really ridiculous fantasy type stuff that's going on in this movie. I had a lot of fun with it. I wouldn't say it's a great movie, but it was definitely entertaining. That's Devil's Sword. Okay, and then just yesterday, I decided, for whatever reason, I wanted to rewatch Blade Runner. Ridley Scott's follow-up to Alien, and just an absolute 1-2 punch of the best, most atmospheric sci-fi movies ever made. And watching it this time just reminded me how much I need to upgrade this Blu-ray. I'm not normally like a 4K guy. Like I buy 4Ks, but I'm not one of those people who has to have everything in 4K. I don't even have to have all my favorite movies in 4K. I think Blu-ray is pretty good for the most part, but this movie is so like visually stunning that I feel like I need to upgrade this one to 4K. I just recently upgraded 2001: A Space Odyssey to 4K just because similar reasons. Like the last time I watched it, I was like, I feel like I just need to get this movie in 4K, and that's how I feel about Blade Runner now after rewatching it this time. It's just such a cool like cyberpunky type movie. If you aren't familiar with Blade Runner, I don't know, I mean, you should be familiar with Blade Runner, but if you're not, the movie is basically a dystopian, futuristic, cyberpunk, kind of like detective noir story about this guy, Rick Deckard, who's a former Blade Runner, and he's tasked with hunting down a group of rogue replicants. The replicants are basically synthetic humans like Ash from Alien. It's interesting rewatching this now with all the stuff going on in the real world with AI and stuff like that. There's definitely heavy themes of like what it means to be a human in this movie, and kind of like the dangers of artificial intelligence. Yeah, I don't know, I can't really say much else that hasn't already been said about Blade Runner. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Blade Runner kicks ass. Just one of the absolute coolest sci-fi movies ever made. Alright, and real quick, the last movie that I watched this week that I just wanted to talk about real quick, a movie that everybody probably has seen that's watching this, and that was Batman Begins. kind of the movie that really skyrocketed Christopher Nolan into superstar director status. The reason I wanted to rewatch this was because I actually just upgraded this. I got the whole trilogy here on 4K. And Matt and I will actually be talking about The Dark Knight Rises on the next episode of Return to Videotech. So yeah, I just kind of felt like watching all three of these before the next episode. It's been a little while since I've watched these. But yeah, I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. The first time I saw it was in a theater in my hometown with some friends, and I remember my buddy Marcus actually brought like a 6-pack of beer in with him. I was only like 15 at the time, I think. 15 or 16, I want to say. So I did not partake in the theater beers with him. But yeah, it was an awesome time, and that's one of my favorite, movie-going memories. At that hometown theater, at least. But yeah, I'm sure you already know this, but it's just an incredible origin story for Batman. I was never a big comic book reader, so I don't know how, comic book accurate or how, close to canon the origin story they gave Batman in this is, but I love all the stuff with Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows. Just super awesome. Liam Neeson does a really good job as Ra's al Ghul. And I just love the whole Bruce Wayne training with the ninjas and kind of going off and running away from Gotham for a couple years and learning what it's like to not just be like a rich kid who's sad because his parents died or whatever. But yeah, I mean, and by today's standards, I feel like this movie is actually pretty dark still. I mean, I don't think you're gonna see in a Marvel movie the main character superhero trying to get revenge on the people who killed his parents by shooting them outside of a courthouse. I feel like that was pretty dark. And the whole thing where the League of Shadows tries to get him to kill a guy who seemed to be just like a low-level criminal to prove his commitment to justice. Like, all that stuff is like pretty dark even by today's standards, I would say. But yeah, you don't need me to ramble on anymore about Batman Begins. Everybody knows this movie's awesome. And yeah, I think after I'm done recording this, I'll probably watch The Dark Knight and then The Dark Knight Rises next. Alright, that's all I got for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you're not already subscribed, please consider doing that. It helps out the channel. In the next week and a half or so, we should have that new episode of Return to Videotech out where we're talking about The Dark Knight Rises. And I also have a bunch of notes ready to go for a new episode of the Criterion Chronicles. It might be kind of a little bit of a retread on some stuff that I already talked about in a round table live stream with my buddy GC from Face the Movies and a whole bunch of other YouTubers around there. We were all just kind of talking about wrapping up the Barnes & Noble sale and talking about a bunch of titles from there that we had watched and picked up. So I think some of those titles I talked about a little bit in that live stream. But I still kind of want to just do, a solo video on those anyways. Harakiri is one of the movies, and Persona. Those are two really big Criterion movies that I watched recently, somewhat recently. So it's a little bit of a double dip on the content, but yeah, I'll try to remember to leave a link to GC Face the Movies channel in the description, and also a link to that round table, which was a lot of fun. We had a really good time just kind of talking about Criterion stuff. So yeah, if you didn't get the chance to check that out, I'll put the link in the description, and then I will have another episode of Criterion Chronicles coming soon, hopefully. But yeah, thanks again for watching. I appreciate you. Have a good week, everybody, and watch the movies. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.